So I would like to now invite up to the stage Richard Lochhead as well as the State Secretary, Norvoll, who was here this morning. So Richard Lochhead is the Minister for the Just Transition, Employment and Fair Work. So certainly is extremely well placed, I think. Yeah, just take a seat here. And just take a seat here. And I think, very well placed to answer some of the questions that were posed by that panel. I mean, certainly there is quite a lot of feeling, I think, that you got there, that we're just not being ambitious enough in Scotland to take advantage of the head start that actually Scotland has got, this winning the natural lottery again, and also really being ambitious when it comes to bringing everybody on board. What would you say to that?
Well, welcome everyone to Aberdeen and Scotland, those of you who've travelled to be here, and thanks for having me along today. And I know this is a fireside chat, so I'm glad it's not coal. I don't see any coal, so that's good. I just want to say that I really love hearing everyone's ambition, and I think that's a good problem to have. People are so ambitious, and there's great music going on in the background as well somewhere. And I think that sums up where Scotland is at the moment, in particular, in that we are a country blessed with an amazing opportunity to shape the rest of the 21st century and go through our energy transition and go towards our very ambitious net zero targets in Scotland. So I think what you're hearing is that we need lots of ambition, and I think we've got that in Scotland. This is a very critical decade for beginning to realise all those ambitions, and we're at the beginning of a very exciting journey. So the 1780s were the most critical decade, the historians tell you, for the Industrial Revolution. And here we are 250 years later. And I believe the 2020s are the really critical decade for net zero and the energy transition. And in Scotland, we've got a leading role to play. We are at a bit of a frustrating juncture, and I think Jake was referring to that a few times, because we're on the cusp of lots of amazing things happening, but we're kind of at this bridge of where we are just now to get to some of those amazing things that are about to happen. And I should say to Jake, listening to what he was saying up here and others, is there are some really amazing things happening in Scotland at the moment in terms of the energy transition. And there are potential really exciting projects which hopefully will come off literally in the next few months or a couple of years that are going to be transformational, and then get us to the next stage, which is 2030, which will be super transformational if it all happens, and then on to 2045 and our net zero targets. So we are at that quite sensitive stage. And I even saw actually on LinkedIn last week, Martin Gilbert, who founded Aberdeen Asset Management, hugely successful fund managers now taken over. He put in LinkedIn that he just released stats saying that in Scotland, the mergers and acquisitions in the renewable sector were £16.4 billion in 2021, triple the year before. There's amazing things happening out there just now in terms of investment.
But how is Scotland going to benefit from that? Is there a chance that actually you could, is this a possibility that actually you could set up a sovereign wealth fund in all but name? I know it's very difficult right now, but surely there's some kind of financial mechanism whereby a proportion of that revenue will go in to support Scotland for the longer term. And how can you make that happen?
Yes, the just transition is about not repeating past mistakes. And oil and gas has been amazing for this part of Scotland and indeed, Scotland and the UK. But of course, in Aberdeen here, we have seen that many communities have not benefited from oil and gas. So you've seen, is it 350 billion pounds worth of revenues have come out of the North Sea into UK Exchequer. But in Aberdeen, the oil and gas capital for many years, now the global energy capital, has not seen all the benefits of that. So we have to make sure we don't repeat those past mistakes. So yes, we are looking at the revenues that are expected to come from the offshore leasing, for instance, for ScotWind. And that will generate, hundreds of millions of pounds of revenues. And we are committed to trying to make sure that's there to benefit future generations. And of course, we're also looking at ways just now of how to potentially have a slice of the action in terms of the ownership of some of the renewables That's kind of up for debate just now, because quite clearly we've got a leadership contest, as people may have noticed, for the Scottish Government and the SNP, and the various candidates are looking at how we can secure more benefit from our energy wealth.
Okay, great. Well, let me bring you in, Tomas Norvoll, because there was that comment made just about how young in the north are not some big amorphous group. It's always the young in the north, and they're not being taken seriously enough. What would you say to that? Because there's clear frustration, I think, among many young people that perhaps they aren't being really brought along in this just transition.
I don't know if that is the overall picture, because I have met many young people, especially in the north, that are extremely active in the debate going on, that are getting quite. How can I put it? That are really being heard, that are given positions. It can be in political parties, it can be in organizations, it can be in companies. So I think it's not black and white. But of course, what we saw, for instance, now with I mentioned earlier the windmills that were kind of where the Norwegian Supreme Court said that this had violated the human rights of the Sami people. We saw demonstrations 2 or 3 weeks ago now, and that was mainly young people, and they were obviously frustrated because they claimed, and they were right, that the government had used too long time since the Supreme Court decision before something happened. And the dilemma here is that there had been trying to establish some kind of dialogue with the adults in the region, but we hadn't succeeded. But as soon as the young people got on the field and they locked down the ministries and chained themselves to the door so we couldn't get in, something happened. But something happens both in the government, and I have to admit that this really made an impact. But something also happened to the debate. Something happens to the Sami parliament. They were all of a sudden more open to have a dialogue with the government than they have been before. So the young people, they really played a crucial role to kind of unlock a situation that has that was very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Really interesting. So we also heard about the fact that young people need to feel empowered and given the opportunities. And so it's almost that you don't want to get to the stage where they've got to lock themselves against and glue themselves to railings or whatever. How do you make sure that they are given the opportunities right at the beginning through school education, but also apprenticeships, and to really feel as though they have a place in this new future? Because at the moment, it seems as though many are adrift.
So there's the wider just transition policy in Scotland, which we're trying to pioneer here, because we don't want to make the same mistakes as I said before, and particularly when the coal industry shut down, which others gave as an example, and communities were just left. And as part of that, we have to ensure young people are involved in that. So the government at the moment in Scotland is trying to have a bottom-up approach to the just transition, and we're financing climate hubs across the country. And I think there's been an announcement yesterday of expanding that. We've got one here in North East Scotland that's very successful, and it's working at community level and working with young people as well. So I don't pretend to have all the answers, and I think it's definitely a big challenge. What I am hearing from employers and from further and higher education, but in this context employers, is that people who are going for interviews now are challenging the prospective employer about what they're doing about their carbon footprint and what they're doing to help, make their contribution to get towards net zero. So it's a two-way process. I think young people are really speaking up and communicating to employers. There was also a report out a couple of weeks ago saying that our colleges and universities in Scotland are way ahead of the game in terms of climate change related courses now that have been introduced. So
do you think
there's things happening, but yeah, I agree, there's a lot more that's got to be done, and we've got to crack it.
And do you think this will also help redress the balance that there has been, as Jake pointed out, within the oil and gas industry, such a predominance of men and not enough women? What needs to be done there? I mean, the accommodation is just one of the things, just one of the many things. What can you do here to move the dial? Yeah,
I was listening to that, and it was a really powerful point that Jake made. I think that's something we should look at pursuing in Scotland, how we can speak to the industry about that. Clearly, the issue's very much a UK government issue in terms of the oil and gas industry, but we should look at what we could do about that. I thought it was a really powerful point. There are, again, various initiatives in terms of the energy transition, particularly here in Aberdeen, where some of the oil companies are working with, I'm trying to remember the title, I think it's called Girls in Energy, and they're working with many girls across all the schools and females in, I don't know, I think at college level as well, but they've got initiatives now to try and address that, which are really important. And there's the wider gender issues that are being addressed, hopefully, in our schools as well. There's lots of STEM-related issues to try and attract women into STEM subjects, and that's had some success in many areas.
And would you say as well, Thomas, that there have been success in really making it a lot more exciting and interesting to stay in those areas where they've been really suffering from depopulation? If there is a bigger energy firm moving in and cleaner, greener energy, does it persuade more people, in your experience, younger people, to stay rather than migrate to the bigger cities?
Yeah, well, yes, and I'm absolutely certain that young people. Well, what is new? What was not the issue when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, but is a fact now, is that young people with skills, they are not bound to the place they come from. They have the world as kind of their perspective. They know that they have skills that are attractive, and they can go wherever they like. And I think one of the problems that we have had in some of the smaller communities or smaller municipalities is that, yes, we can provide one attractive job. Would you like to come and have it? And if you are newly educated, you have ambitions, you say, this is an exciting job. But after 5 years, what am I going to do here? After 10 years, what is going to be my next job? And that has made these small places very fragile, because you can attract someone to come to have this job, maybe, but you don't have any incentives to make them to stay and to establish.
So you need to develop clusters of opportunity.
You have to have more interesting jobs in the same region to succeed. So if you have a large company that comes and say, okay, we're going to do we're going to do a lot of things here. We're going to create a lot of jobs here, then it will work. But just having one job here and one there, I don't think that will be the solution. And then the problem is that, of course, we would like all societies, all municipalities to thrive. And that can be difficult because we don't have 10 million large companies that can come into every small community and say, okay, we establish 100 attractive jobs here. So we maybe have to admit that we have to centralize some of the efforts also in the northern regions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'm going to open up for questions, so do let me know if you just raise your hand. I'm sure there will be lots of them. I just want, before we get to them, there was that question that Jake said as well, is that the problem is we keep talking about building another wind farm, creating better offshore wind energy. At the same time, there is so much that needs to be done in terms of our energy use, in terms of ensuring that there's a transition to greener, cleaner energy in all parts of our lives. How can you do this simultaneously? And you've got to do this simultaneously. And what is in motion, really, to ensure this is going to happen?
Well, at the moment, the Scottish Government's refreshing its energy strategy, which is out for consultation until May, and it's also the first Just Transition Plan, which is for energy. It's out for consultation, and that covers all these areas. And I think there's a challenge there for government, because Scotland's got so many opportunities at the moment and a lot of plans. So if you look at the cost of up to £30 billion to decarbonise 1 million homes and 100,000 public buildings, which is the target by 2030, that's £30 billion alone, and that could create 16,000 jobs. There's hydrogen, which could create 300,000 jobs, up to 300,000 jobs, according to the most recent report in Scotland. Individually, they're all massive opportunities. And I do think our challenge is over the next while, and we'll look at this consultation, what people are saying, is what do we really throw our effort into? We have to do a bit of everything, but there may be one or two priorities we really have to throw our effort into here. Obviously, we are with offshore winds, but and we need the skills and the people, and we might not have the skills and people to do everything as fast as we'd like. So, yes, we'd have to do a bit of everything, but there's a lot happening. There's so much happening. I heard Jake saying that the supply chain are not benefiting as much as they should. I go to offshore companies in Aberdeen who are oil and gas companies who tell me 70% of their work's renewables. But they're an oil and gas company, so they're not counted as a renewables company, but you go and speak to them and say, well, 70% of our order book is renewables. In my own constituency, I found out last week alone, a company's opened up in engineering, employing 20 to 30 people. I represent Murray, which is just north of Aberdeen, an hour and a half north of here. And it's because of energy projects. And the next door office in the Enterprise Park is an architectural design company who are going to employ, I think, 10 or 12 people because of energy work. So it's happening all over at the moment in Scotland, and they're not necessarily identified or counted, but there's a revolution happening out there in the economy.
And what are you going to do about the supply chain and making sure that the supply chain really can develop in Scotland in terms of proportion, like as mentioned, there is in France, for example?
Yeah, well, again, I've been speaking to them just last week and said to them, what do we do? The Wood Group, massive multinational based in Aberdeen, came out of oil and gas. Who are the equivalents that are going to come out of renewables and the other clean technologies in the coming decades? Because we should have that happening here in Scotland with the supply chain. And again, I think there's a lot happening, but we're in that gap between laying down the plans, putting in place the seeds, but we need the actual things to be built, and then that will give the supply chain the work. And oil and gas is not going anywhere. It's a transition. We often have these questions, these debates, as if one thing stops and another thing starts. It's not, it's a transition. Oil and gas will be with us till the 2040s, perhaps beyond. Nowhere near to the same degree as just now, but it's a transition over the next couple of decades. So oil and gas is not stopping tomorrow. And in fact, if you speak to the companies in Aberdeen, they can't find staff to work for them. So they're doing pretty well at the moment. So it's a transition.
In terms of the overall plan, I mean, there was a bit of frustration within that panel that there isn't a plan. There's no one big plan. There's not a big blueprint. There's lots of little plans. And who is responsible for the big plan for Scotland?
Well, we have an economic strategy, which is called the Economic Strategy for Transformation, which is about transforming the economy in the next couple of decades, driven by the net zero policy. And there's obviously a lot in there, but in terms of just transition, the way we're approaching it in Scotland is we're doing sector by sector just transition plans, with energy being the first, working and co-designing that with the trade unions, the employers, the employees, communities, and we're going to do other sectors of the economy, working with the highest emitting ones first, and then we're going to do regional plans for different parts of Scotland. So it's important that every village, town, city, employer, every part of the public sector, private sector has their own just transition plans, because we all have to decarbonise, grasp the opportunities and make sure there's jobs there for people as we go through that.
And how does this work
but I would
with
say that, I think, again, so I'm not picking on Jake, but I think he said that we need a plan for oil and gas. Look what's happened in the last 12 months. If we'd had a plan 2 years ago, we'd have had to, revisit it dramatically because of what's happened globally in the last 12 months. So it's not easy always to have the perfect plan in place, because the world is very volatile. We've had Brexit, we've had COVID, we've got the illegal war in Ukraine, we've got all these things happening, so it's quite a difficult time to have the perfect plan in place.
Yeah, I mean, you always have to change the plan when things go wrong, of course, but it's just having that kind of the strategy and the horizon of what you're working to. I think that was the frustration of the panel. I think we're leading here because we have just transition planning, and that is to avoid things that happened back in the 1980s with the coal industry. We're doing it differently this time. Right, let's open some questions. Thank you very much, Minister. So, there's a question in the middle, and then a question just here to the right, and I'll get Hannah Mary as well.
Today we've been listening a lot about technology, right? Like technology is going to solve all our problems. We've been mentioning about carbon capture, which it's a panacea, it's going to solve things, but the majority of carbon capture projects have failed or they have been cancelled. Technology is what has brought us to this mess. So why are we expecting from technology to solve those problems, and we're not discussing about other solutions? Why the energy transition is based on the development of more technology and the production of more material?
Can I ask you to take that one?
Yeah, well, I think we have to do everything, because if we are going to meet the climate crisis, and we are far, far, far away from doing what we should do, we have to do everything. So we have to kind of do a shift in production to make sure that we take down the emission, but we also have to do carbon capture. You also have to do carbon utilization, using the carbon as a raw material into new products. I don't think you can say that it's just one path to follow. Then it will certainly not be enough. Me myself, I'm a technology optimist, and I think but the history tells us that I can't come up with one example when the right thing has been to say, no, we just stop this and go back to the past. We have always moved forward. We have a problem, we put our best people into trying to solve it, and we move forward. And I think that's how it has to be this time too. Otherwise, if we were to stop with some of the industry, much of the industry that we are doing, we will then face another total crisis with people getting unemployed. So you have to balance this and do all sorts of things to succeed.
There was a question, yeah.
I realize I've asked a few questions already today, so this will probably be my last. I think, based on what I understand in Scotland, transport is our largest proportion of carbon emissions. And in Norway, I know that there's a lot of dependency on short flights, for example, Videre to and from. So basically, I spend a lot of time in Norway because I teach Norwegian at University College London. So usually I'm going around, not necessarily by bus or by train, but by plane. And it's very inconvenient. In Scotland, of course, we still have aspects of our train network being still diesel, single track, and we're still putting money into building more roads. So why can't we put more focus on public transport, making it cheaper, potentially free for some people, doing more basically where no longer the fuel costs are individualized, but the kind of cost of the fossil fuels that we're still needing to use are used in public transport whilst we get people out of their cars. Okay,
Could you take that one first of all?
Yeah, transport's obviously a huge challenge, and you're right. It's I think it's 20% of our emissions is from transport, and there will be a transport just transition plan published in the next year or so, because it's got to be a just transition. I hear all kinds of proposals about how to cut the emissions from transport, and then I think to myself, well, that's not much of a just transition if that part of the country is going to be cut off because we're not, doing certain things. We have to take the people with us on this. And Jake said that buses, I keep picking Jake, sorry, just need a couple of points I want to come back on, that our buses are they're still running in diesel. It's not true. A lot are still running in diesel, but here in Aberdeen, for instance, I just did a photo call with the 1,000th electric bus in Scotland recently, because we've got a lot of electric buses in Aberdeen. So the chances are if you go outside and get a bus around Aberdeen, it'll be electric, not diesel. So we are trying to make those changes. And in Scotland, we have many, many islands, and we have short-haul flights because they're called lifeline routes. So it's not easy to suddenly say we're going to stop that because we don't want emissions from aviation. But there's lots of research going on in Scotland just now into clean aviation fuels. And there's got to be a lot more of that going forward. And our next big thing is we've got a big target to cut the number of kilometres travelled by cars. And we're bringing out proposals shortly, saying more about how we're going to do that.
Thank you. And obviously, this is a really hot topic in Norway as well.
Yes, and in Norway, the parliament has really, I don't know if I will say that they have led the way, but they have been really ambitious. So I think it is by 2027, they will not be allowed to have public transportation, buses and taxis that runs on fossil fuel. And but this is it is the counties that are operating the local transport in Norway. So that means that no county council can put a new contract into business with fossil fuel. When it comes to the short flights, you will have some of the same situation because luckily they are publicly funded, some of these. That means that you can also put demands onto it, and there's going to be a new bid this year, and then you will have demands that you have a shift in the aircrafts, so that you stimulate to have less emission, and we are also trying to initiate a project that you will start to use zero emission flights. That's really exciting. I'm not going to be on the first flight, but but I think it should be possible. So we are moving ahead all the time, and it's really important.
Hannah Mary, I know you wanted to ask a question. Is that right? Yeah.
I just want to make a comment back to the technology question as well, because I think it's quite relevant. If you look back in time since the Kyoto Protocol was established back in 1997, where we said we will stop global emissions rising and we'll try to reduce. Every year on year, emissions have gone up, apart from 2 years, 2008 and then 2020. And what happened in those 2 years wasn't about technology innovation or invention. It wasn't about a new product coming online. It was the global financial crisis, and it was COVID, and that was demand that dropped. So my answer to that is yes, I'm a technology optimist as well. But I think we always talk about supply in the sort of energy debate, and we talk about supply and we don't really focus on the demand side of things. And I think to tackle that, we need to look at both sides of the equation, because I don't believe that technology will save us. We actually need to start looking at the mindset and the behaviour. But my question was to Richard about Norway and Scotland and the shared North Sea that we have between us. When it comes to the energy transition, we have similar energy industries that are grappling with the problems. How can we narrow the North Sea and actually depend on one another more and collaborate with one another more to make sure that we get this transition faster? How can Norway and Scotland work better together?
That's a very good question, and I won't get too political with the answer, but there's been a lot of bilateral work between the two countries over the last few years, and indeed I was in Norway last year, and many of my colleagues have been since, and we've also got esteemed visitors to Scotland this week as well. So there are some discussions going on about closer collaboration, particularly over offshore winds, and of course we've got Norwegian companies who are very active in Scotland as well. So I think that's got a lot of potential, and we are looking at that at the moment. Clearly, foreign affairs and international trade are reserved to the UK government, so we don't always get as much influence as we'd like over these things. But Norway has been very, very open to working with Scotland, and likewise, clearly, we're very open to working with Norway.
I mean, I have to mention this because, of course, there is disappointment that the North Connect cable project has been turned down by Norway, between Norway and Scotland. I mean, where do we go from here now that it's been turned down?
Well, the reason why the government decided to not allow that, well, this is a project that there are 3 Norwegian and 1 Swedish power company that took the initiative that they wanted to build another cable to connect the electricity grid on both sides of the North Sea. There is 1 cable already. The capacity is not fully used on that one. But this was a project that the former government were really eager to do. If you look a few years back, it might seem like a reasonable thing. But things have changed, and they've changed a lot. We have gone from a situation where we had a surplus of renewable energy in Norway till we don't have it anymore, and the prices are sky high. Even in northern Norway, the best case scenario says that we will have a lack of energy by 2030. That's the best case scenario in northern Norway. And the reason for this is not just the war. It is, first of all, the electrification of the cars, and it is new industry, especially battery cell plants that are being established around that use lots of energy. So we are in a different situation now, and it would not be right when we have a situation where people pay 5 to 10 times as much for electricity as it did a few years ago, to say that we are going to build a cable so that someone can profit on the price difference between the UK and Norway. That's just not bearable, so that's why they put it away. I believe that when we get to start building offshore wind, you will have a different situation. This cable project is dead, but of course when you start building a large amount of offshore wind, there will be a need to have some kind of transition between the markets of that electricity, and I believe then we will have a surplus, and then we can talk again.
Okay, thank you. And just finally, Richard, okay, could you tell me what you're most optimistic about right now?
I'm just super excited because when I go around Scotland just now and I speak to small innovation companies or large oil and gas companies, stroke energy companies, or any of a myriad of different sectors, there's a revolution happening just now in Scotland. There's very much a green revolution happening. And we saw a report just a month or two back saying 100,000 new green jobs have been created in Scotland. And I gave you an illustration of the investment that's happening. So I'm just really optimistic that Scotland's got an opportunity here to become one of the world's most successful decarbonised economies, but at the same time to make sure that everyone living in the country benefits. And I'm really optimistic about that. Yes, there's a few obstacles in the way. There's the national grid, there's some UK policies, but there's momentum in Scotland. And as someone said to me a couple of days ago, the reason why I'm seeing so much energy work, he actually is an accountant in a big, huge accountancy firm, so they're all benefiting from the energy revolution. He said, Scotland at the moment is fashionable. Globally, Scotland is seen as a pioneer, leading country for this, and a first mover, so I'm optimistic about that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's a good point to end on a note of optimism. So I would like to thank you both, Minister, State Secretary, for all of your views today. And thank you all for coming. It's been a really great event, and I really appreciate you all getting involved. We've got a reception being held right now, so please use it to exchange more ideas and share our knowledge. So thank you very much.